Let's go. Recording. Good together. Evan, are you where you need to be yet? Are you sure? Because yours and Julian are matching. What are you? Okay, well, I just hope it records. If the first part's shot off, oh well. All right, Mrs. Knifel's been dying to finish chapter 8. So remember, they found this Hooversville, named after President Herbert Hoover. It's like this little shacky town. They ate this muskrat stew, like, you know, whatever. Now they're washing dishes. And remember, Miss Deza Malone was, you know, trying to get romantic. And she was like, have you ever kissed anyone before? And he was like, oh, snap, come on. So I'm going to... All right, I'm going to start at the very bottom of page 74, and then we'll head on to 75. So, well, we got the last 4 or 5 tin can plates, and Dessa said, you ever kissed a girl at the orphanage? Uh-oh. Are you kidding? No. Why? You afraid of girls? You must be kidding. She said, okay, and closed her eyes and mushed her lips up and leaned close to me. Dangy. If I didn't kiss her, she'd think I was scared of girls. If I did kiss her, she might blab or Bugs might see me and tell strangers about what happened. I looked down the creek to where Bugs and the other boy were still splashed in the water. It was dark enough that I didn't think they could see us too good. I scooched my lips up and mashed my face on Deza Malone's. We stuck like that for a hot second, but it felt like a long time. When I opened my eyes and pulled back, Deza kept her eyes closed and smiled. She looked down and stuck her hand in mine again, and this time I let her keep it there. She looked out at the creek and the woods on the other side and said, isn't this romantic? I looked out to see what she was talking about. The only thing I could see was the moon like a big egg yolk way up in the sky. I could hear the water and the sound of the mouth organ man playing a sad song back in Hooverville. I sneaked another peek at Dez's dimple. She said, you hear that? That's a Shadadon. He's playing, isn't it? Shadadon, whatever that name is. He's playing, isn't it pretty? I guess so. Do you know the words? Uh-huh, listen. It's been 7 long years since I've last seen her. Way, hey, you rolling river, been 7 long years since I've last seen her. Way, hey, I'm bound way across the wide Missouri. I know, Mrs. Kleinfeld's a great singer. Okay, clearly that should have been my career path. Okay. I know. Molly's clapping for me. All you people aren't, but thanks, Molly, for the support over there. I said, yep, that's a sad song. I didn't think it was pretty at all. She squeezed my hand and said, isn't it? It's about an Indian man and a woman who can't see each other for 7 years. But in all that time, they stay in love no matter what happens. It reminds me of my mother and father. Your dad's been gone for 7 years? Wait, your dad's been gone for 7 years before? She looked out of the creek, looked over the creek like a big eggy moon had her hypnotized and pulled my hand from hers and said, well, that's just about it for the dishes. She smiled again. Bud, I'll never forget this night. Okay, so they're just washing dishes. These poor kids that like don't have any home, and apparently to Miss Deza, it's like the most romantic night ever. She kissed Bud, and she's just like, "I'll never forget this." Remember, Bud's only like 10, so he's like your guys' age. But okay, I just think it's so silly. Okay, I didn't tell her I probably wouldn't forget it either. I'd practiced on the back of my hand before, but this was the first time I'd ever busted slob with a real live girl. Busted slob? Come on, like slobber. That's so funny. Yeah, he practiced kissing on the back of his hand. We loaded all the dishes in the box and walked down to Bugs and the other kid. We put the dishes on top of ours and headed back. Bugs said, How come you're looking so strange, bud? You look like you've been chucked in the head with a rock. Desi Malone laughed. For a second, I thought she was going to rat me out. I said, I don't know. I guess the song is making me kind of sad. Bug said, yeah, it is kind of sad. Right before we got into the cardboard jungle, we passed the white people with the coffin baby at their own little fire. I said to Deza, how come they're off alone? They ain't allowed to sit around the big fire because the baby's making so much noise? Deza said, they've been invited, but my daddy said you got to feel sorry for them. All they're eating is dandelion green soup. They're broke. Their clothes are falling off them. Their baby's sick. But when someone took them some food and blankets, the man said, thank you very much, but we're white people. We ain't in need of a handout. So most of the people, I don't want to say all, but most of the people in the cardboard jungle are African American people. But there's this white family there that has this sick baby, and they think that they're like too good to be associating with the other African American people and all the other people, even though they literally have like no food and no clothes and no blankets, and their baby's really sick. But they still are like, nope, we don't need a handout from anyone. We're fine. So they're like being really proud, even though like they probably shouldn't be, because you know they really need help, but they're nope, won't take any help. So they're being stubborn. When we got back to because just for the record, this is 1936. It's during the Great Depression. Like African American people and white people, there's still definitely segregation going on, and it's definitely not like it is now, where all different races are integrated together. There's definitely still like stigma in it, and during the Great Depression. When we got back to the main fire of Hooverville, we put the dishes in another box. Dessa made us turn them all upside down, so if it rained got in them, they wouldn't get rust. I went to the woman with my suitcase. It was there in the same spot I'd left it, and the knots in the twine were the kind I tied. I said, thank you very much, ma'am. She said, I told you not to worry. I went back to the big fire to sit with Bugs. The mouth organ man said, I suppose you boys are going out on the train tomorrow? I said, the one for Chicago, sir? He said, that's the one. I said, yes, we are, sir. He said, well, you best get as much sleep as you can. I suppose it's supposed to be pulling out at 5:15, but you never know with these freights. So remember, they're in this camp, whatever, but everyone's going to be trying to catch this train tomorrow. But you can't just hop on the train for fun. You got to like sneak on it. So the man's like, you better go get some sleep, okay? 5:15 is going to come fast. We got in one of the shacks with other boys. Bugs was snoring in 2 seconds, but I couldn't fall asleep. I opened my jackknife and put it under my blanket. I was thinking Dez's mom was right. Someone who doesn't know who their family is like dust blowing around in a storm. They don't really belong any one place. I started wondering if going to California was the right thing to do. I might not know who my family was, but I knew they were out there somewhere, and it seemed to make a whole lot more sense to think they were somewhere around Flint instead of out west. I opened my suitcase to get my blanket. Even though I trusted the woman who guarded it for me, I checked to make sure everything was okay. All right, so I really like, well, it's sad, but to think about the dust blowing in the wind. So Bud's thinking of himself like dust. He doesn't have a place to go. He doesn't have family members to go to. He's literally like dust, just blowing around. No one really cares really where he goes or what he does. So, but he's already double thinking this, like, okay, should I go out west on this train? Or, my family, if I have any, is probably somewhere by me. You would think, right? I mean, that's not how it is all the time, but lots of times families are all like kind of in the same vicinity. All my family lives in Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. I think I have one family member out west in Nevada, but that's it. Think about your own family. Do most of them kind of live in the same area? I picked up the tobacco pouch that had my rocks in it and pulled the drawstring open. I shook the 5 smooth stones out and looked at them. They'd been in the drawer after the ambulance took Mama away, and I'd had them ever since. Someone had took a pen or something and writ on the 5 of them, but it was written in a code, so I couldn't understand what it meant. One of them said, Kentland ill, 5:10:11. Another said, Bugogeti in 5:16:11. There was Strigus M 8:30:12 and Gary in 6:13:12, and the last one said Flint M 8:11:11. All right. So, does anyone want to give me a guess on what those are? Zach? Right, those are popular cities. Because IN would be Indiana, ILL would be Illinois. Flint M, we're gonna assume that's Michigan, right? Because Flint, Michigan, the Stragus M Now, I'm not totally sure about the numbers because those couldn't necessarily, because you'd think, oh, those are dates, like May 10th, 2011. But remember, this is in 1936, so those can't necessarily be dates. So maybe they're coordinates, maybe there's something else. We're not totally sure. Or maybe they are dates just written in a weird order. But they're city and states for sure, written on these rocks, which that's the first time we've heard about that these rocks have writing on them. They're not just plain rocks. I put them back in their pouch and pulled the string tight. Then I pulled the envelope out and had the picture of the saggy pony at the Miss B's Gotten Moon Park. It was fine. Next, I counted the flyers again. All 5 were there. I slid all of them back except the blue one. I held it up so I could catch some of the light from the big fire. I kept looking at the picture and wondering why this one bothered Mama so much. The more I thought about it, the more I knew this man had to be my father. Why else would Mama keep it? Right, we don't know who wrote on him, but Landon. But the rocks were just apparently in his mom's drawer, and he found them after the ambulance, took Mom away. He found these rocks. He also, gathered up all these little flyer things. I used a little trick to help me fall asleep at night. I pulled my blanket right up over my head, then breathed in the smell real deep. After doing this 3 times, the smells of the shack and Hooverville were gone, and only the smell of the blanket was in my nose. And that smell always reminded me of Mama and how she used to read me to sleep every night. I took 2 more breaths and pretending I was hearing Mama reading to me about Billy Goat's Gruff and the fox and the grapes or the dogs that saw his reflection in the water or some other story she'd checked out from the library. I could hear Mama's voice getting farther and farther away as I imagined I was in the story until finally her voice and the stories all mixed into one. So, even though his mom died 4 years ago, he's still able to imagine her reading to him, and that's how he helps himself go to sleep. I'd learned it was best to be asleep before Mama finished the story because if she got done and I was still awake, she'd always tell me what the story was about. I never told Mama, but that always ruined the fun of the stories. Ruined? That means ruined. Shucks. Here I was thinking I was just hearing something funny about a fox or a dog, and Mama spoiled it by telling me they were really lessons about not being greedy or not wishing for the things you could have. So what is that called? Mama was telling him the what? This is the theme. Zach said it. Mama was telling him the theme of the story, like the lesson the author wanted you to learn. So he's just, he's 6. He's like, oh yeah, there's a fox and a dog. Life's great. And she's like, oh no. The lesson, let me tell you what this really is. Obviously, they didn't call it a theme or whatever, but that's what she was telling him. She was telling him about the theme. So go her. I took 2 more breaths and started thinking about the little hen that baked bread. I heard, not I, said the pig. Not I, said the goat. Not I, said the big bad wolf. Then whoop, zoop, sloop. I was asleep. I started dreaming about the man with the giant fiddle. He was walking away and I kept calling him, but he couldn't look back. Then the dream got a lot better. I turned away from Hermione Calloway and there stood Desmond Malone. I told her I really like your dimple. She laughed and said, see you in 7 years. All right, so remember, the man with the big fiddle is the guy on the flyer. Remember who he thinks is his father, Hermione Calloway. Okay, in case you forgot that. All right, we're about to read the next good part of chapter 8. Let's try to finish chapter 8 today. Whew, it's about to get good. So he's asleep. Life's good. They're about to hop this train tomorrow. Okay, well, I take that back. Life's not good, okay? It's not a good life. At least not Mrs. Kniffel's good. All right, ready? Da-da-da-da. About to be a change of pace. A man screamed, get up! They're trying to sneak out early! I jumped straight up and banged my head on the top of the shack. I ran outside. It was still dark, and the fire was just a pile of glowing sticks. The man was screaming at the top of his lungs, get up! They're fired their engines, and they're fixing to take off! Bugs and the other boys came and stood next to me. Bugs said, is it a raid? Someone said, no, they're trying to sneak out before we get up. People started running all over Hooverville. Bugs said, come on, bud, get your stuff. We gotta get on that train. So what's happening? Someone unmute themselves and tell me what's happening here. Olivia, what's happening here, ma'am?
What's happening is that the train's leaving early so that people can't sneak onto it.
Perfect. So it's not like the train conductors don't know that people are trying to sneak onto it. So it's supposed to be at 5:15, but they're trying to sneak out early so people will be asleep still and they won't get on it. But someone woke up and now this guy's screaming, get on the train, get on the train. So it's about to be mad rush, okay? But Bugs is like, get your stuff, we're getting on the train. I folded my blanket up and put it in my suitcase and tied the twine back. I put my jackknife in my pocket and Bugs and I ran outside. I hadn't got 6 giant steps away when a boy stuck his head out the door and yelled, "Hey, Slim, is this your paper?" I looked back. My blue flyer. I forgot to put it back in my suitcase. Bud said, "Hurry, I'll wait. I'll catch you. Go ahead." I ran back and took my flyer from the boy. "Thanks a lot." I ran back into the crowd that was tearing through the woods. There were a million men and boys running in the same direction. Probably really wasn't a million, but it was probably seemed like a lot of people. I didn't want to fold the flyer up as I was running, so I slid it between the twine and the suitcase. I'll put it back inside once we got on the train. No one was talking. All you could hear were the sounds of a million feet smacking on the trail and the sounds of a million people trying to catch their breath. Finally, a hiss sound started getting louder and louder, and I knew we weren't too far away. We broke out of the woods, and there was a dark We broke out the woods, and there was a dark oh my goodness. Let me try a third time's charm. We broke out of the woods, and there in the dark sat the train. The locomotive was hissing and spitting coal black smoke into the sky. Every once in a while, a big shower of sparks would glow from the inside of the dark cloud, making it look like a gigantic black genie was trying to raise up from the smokestack. The train went as far back as you could see. There must have been 1,000 boxcars, but everyone had stopped and was just standing there watching. No one was trying to get on. I pushed my way to the front to see if I could find Bugs, and I saw why everyone had stopped. There were 4 cop cars, 8 cops standing between the crowd and the train. The cops all had billy clubs and were spread out to protect the train. So the billy clubs, those are just, I don't know if you've ever seen in movies, like cops like have a club. They're like, I don't know, you can hit people with them. So remember, train police that Jez Malone was talking about, they don't just let you hop on the train. So there's, he said 1 million, but there's a ton of people, and now they're all stopped. Here's the train, here's the cops, here's the people. But there's a ton of people and 8 cops. I don't know about those odds there for those cops. Okay? The crowd kept getting bigger and bigger. One of the cops yelled, "You men know you can't get on this train. Just go back to the shanty town and there won't be no trouble." A white man said, "This is the only train going west for the next month. You know we got families to feed and have to be on it. You go get back in your cars and we'll be all right. There won't be no trouble." The cop said, "I'm warning you, the Flint police are on the way. This here's private property and they have orders to shoot anyone who tries to get on this train." All right, this is real serious now, okay? Like, people are getting threatened to be shot for getting on this train. A man said next to me, "I'd rather be shot than sit around and watch my kids go hungry." The man said, "This is America, boys. You're sounding like a bunch of commies. You know I can't let you on this train. I got kids to feed too, and I'd lose my job." Someone yelled, "Well, welcome to the club, brother." It seemed like we stood looking at the cops and them looking at us for a whole hour. Our side was getting bigger and bigger, and the cops started looking nervous. The one who was doing all the talking saw them fidgeting and said, "Hold steady, men." All right. So obviously the cops are noticing there's 8 of us and there's a giant crowd. Okay, obviously the odds are not in the cops' favor right now. And so far it doesn't say they have guns, they just have these club things. So he said the other cops come and have the guns. We don't know. One of the cops said, "Jake, there's 400 men out there and more coming. I don't like these odds. Mr. Pinkerton ain't playing me enough to do this." He threw his cop hat and his billy club on the ground. Everybody froze when the train whistle blew one long time and the engine started saying, "Shush, shush, shush." The big steel wheels creaked a couple of times and started moving. 4 of the other cops threw their hats and billy clubs down too. The boss cop said, "You lily-livered rats." And it was like someone said, "On your marks, get set, go." The engine was saying, "Shush, shush, shush." And the million boys and men broke for the train. Okay, so 5 of the 8 cops were like, "Yeah, I'm out. I'm not about to do this. I don't want to die." Because there's 400 and some plus whatever. So they just like, "I'm out. Yeah, go get on the train. I ain't getting paid enough for this." So everyone's running for the train now. I got pushed from behind and fell on top of my suitcase. Someone reached down and pulled me up. I squeezed my bag to my stomach and ran. The train was going faster and faster. People were jumping on and reaching back to help others. I finally got to the tracks and was running as hard as I could. I looked up into the boxcar and saw Bugs. He screamed, "Bud, throw your bag! Throw me your bag!" I used both hands to throw my suitcase at the train. Bugs caught it, and when he set it behind him, the blue fire blew out of the twine and fluttered outside the door. It was like a miracle. You can check it out if you need a pen. Oh, there's one over there. It was like a miracle. The fire flipped over 3 times and landed right in my hand. I slowed down and put it in my pocket. Bugs reached out his arm and screamed, "Bud, don't stop. Run." I started running again, and it felt like my legs were gone. The car that with Bugs, and it was going farther and farther away. Finally, I stopped. Bugs was leaning out the door and stopped reaching back for me. He waved and disappeared into the boxcar. A second later, my suitcase came flying out the door. I walked over to where it landed and picked it up. Man, this is one tough suitcase. You couldn't even tell what it had been through. It looked exactly the same. I sat on the side of the tracks and tried to catch my breath. All right, so did he make it on the train? No, but Bugs did, okay? So he didn't make it. That stinks. The train and my new pretend brother got farther and farther away, chugging to Chicago. Man, I'd found some family and he was gone before we really got to know each other. Because remember, him and Bugs like slap spit and, they were best friends, whatever, brothers. There were 6 or 7 other people who didn't make the train, so we walked back to Hooverville. They must have lit a big fire again. The sky in the direction was glowing orange. The cop first threw down his billy club, walked over to us and said, he wasn't lying about the Flint police coming, but they're coming to bust up the shanty town. You all should get out of here. So this cop's like, hey guys, don't go back to where you just came from because the other police really are coming. So he's trying to warn them. So go this cop. Clearly nice guy. When we got close to Hooverville, we heard 4 gunshots. We all spread into the woods and sneaked up to see what was happening. I peeked from behind a tree and could see a bunch of cops standing around with pistols out. All of the men and boys and women that were left in the Hooverville were bunched up to one side and the cops were on the other. The fire had been lit and was burning bigger than ever. But now it was burning because the cops were tearing down the shacks and were throwing the wood and cardboard and hunks of cloths into the middle of it. One of the cops dragged the big clothes washing pot over to the side and stuck his pistol down in it and shot 4 times. Woo! Phew, instead of shooting people, they were shooting holes into all the pots and pans. All right. So the cops are literally just destroying things just for fun. They're shooting this pot because if you shoot a pot that holds water and there's a hole in it, will it be able to hold water? No, obviously not. So he's ruining it. The man yelled, "You yellow-bellied lowlifes, you waited till you knew most of the men were gone, you cowards." So obviously, if the cops would have came when there was 400 people there, they wouldn't have been able to do much. But now almost everyone's gone, and the cops are destroying everything. The cops wouldn't talk or nothing. They just kept piling Flint's Hooverville into the fire. I tried to see if I could spot Des Malone, but there were too many people. It seemed like the only good thing that came out of going to Hooverville was that I finally kissed a girl. Maybe someone was trying to tell me something. What with me missing the train, the blue flyer floating back to me, maybe Des Malone was right. Maybe I should stay here in Flint. I walked back further into the woods and sat down. I pulled the blue flyer out of my pocket and opened my suitcase back up. I smoothed the flyer out and took another good look at it. Maybe it came floating right back to me because this Herman E. Calloway really was my father. Wait a minute. I sat up. The names Caldwell and Calloway are a lot alike. Both of them have 8 letters and aren't too many names that have C, A, L, and a W all together like that. I remember what I read in Little Big Book, Gangbusters. It said a good criminal chooses an alias that's kind of close to their own name. Except I couldn't figure out who the criminal was here and why anybody needed an alias. So an alias is like a name you make up. Like, what? Like Voldemort. If Harry Potter, that's not his real name. His real name is like, can't think of it right now, but I definitely heard it this weekend. What? Tom Riddle. See? It's like Tom Madolo, something Riddle, but Lord Voldemort. That would be an alias. My husband, when he doesn't want to give people his name, he calls himself Franklin. That's my husband's alias. Not that he's a criminal, but whatever. So I wanted to stay and look for Deza, her mom, but it was too hard to hear all the people crying and arguing. Besides, I was still on the lam. I started walking. If I hurried, I could get to get breakfast at the mission. So this whole night, like, he's going to Hooverville, all this crazy stuff's happened. He's gonna get on the train. Oh my God, kissed a girl, missed the train, and now he's like, well, that plan's over. I'm gonna go head back to the mission and go get some breakfast. Okay, like I love chapter 8. I think it's so good. We're gonna start with chapter 9 tomorrow. We are out of time. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed chapter 8 like I did. I'll see you guys in Math RTI or later in reading class. Yeah, chapter 8 was long because so much happened. Bye guys, hop off. It's time for Math RTI, everyone else. Bye, guys. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Well, because Bugs knew it was important to him. At least Bugs didn't like steal it or something.